Okay, you guys are probably wondering what the heck I'm doing here. Well, I'm making hard cider. Of course, then I guess your next question is gonna be, why the heck am I poking holes in balloons with a needle to make hard cider? I guess I should just back up a little bit. So here on our farm in northern Vermont, we're in the full swing of apple season. Apples are one of the crops that is absolutely crazy abundant here in Vermont. Everywhere you look, you'll find wild apple trees that have sprung up over the years. You find old apple trees that have been ignored and neglected. You find young apple trees that people are nurturing and trying to grow into thriving orchards. You find apple trees everywhere, and it's so easy to grow them. Even here, specifically on our property, we easily have a dozen apple trees that are just out there in the wild doing their thing that I barely do anything to maintain. And given that abundance, I've found it to be important to try to take advantage, full advantage, of the apples that we have here on our farm. Last year was actually a very weak apple crop, and there was very limited apples. And so to take advantage of apple season, my friend Rachel and I were forced to drive around the back roads of the region and find abandoned trees that we could then steal from. By the way, that practice is known as scrumping. We had a lot of fun on our adventure. We even ran into actor Luis Guzman.
Look at me and all the beautiful women I've been with.
But this year, it's totally different. This year, there are apples everywhere. There is no apple shortage. There are plenty of apples. So over the last several days, I've set forth to actually collect as many apples as I possibly can. I've enlisted relatives to help me. I've enlisted Allison to help me. We have been working with friends to collect as many apples as we possibly could, because our plan was to go to my friend Leslie's house and press a bunch of cider. And I know you guys are saying, wait a minute, what does this have to do with the needle and the balloons? But wait, I'll get to that at the end. You'll completely understand and it'll totally make sense. Just the act of picking apples is a lot of fun to me. It's something that I've been doing since I was a little kid. Even this last go around, I spent a lot of time with my father picking apples all around our farm, and we even drove around a little bit and found some apples too. There's a couple different methods that we use to harvest the apples. You know, we've tried the method where you shake the trees and let them all land on a tarp, but usually they land all over the place. What I have found that's worked the best is to just go through and quickly grab as many apples as you possibly can and move from tree to tree as quickly as you can, just focusing on the low-hanging fruit. Don't waste your time with, you know, the grabber thing or other devices. Just, you know, grab and go, grab and go, grab and go. And so over the last couple of days, we have completely picked Goldshaw Farm. We've also completely picked several trees all in the neighboring area. Trees that are known to be neglected and abandoned, and nobody would have a problem with us taking the apples. I know you're supposed to measure an apple in a bushel, and I have no idea what a bushel is in terms of weight or volume. And so I'm just gonna say there were hundreds of apples. We were collecting them in feed bags and just holding them, and they were just heavy as all get out.
Do you like apples? How do you like them apples?
So after we collected all the apples though, we decided to go to my friend Leslie's house. Now Leslie has this awesome apple press. You might have remembered seeing me use it last year, but it's got a two-stage function to it. It's kind of like an old-fashioned apple press, except the masticator is actually it's got this old electric motor that drives it, so you don't have to do the hand cranking, and it's much easier than that. And Leslie was even hosting essentially a little party for all of our friends and neighbors to get together, and we were all working together to process the apples. Apple season here in Vermont, it only reminds me of one other thing, which is maple syrup season, where you have all these people coming together working to process the abundance of the trees in the area and use it for food for future times, whether it be the maple syrup that we use throughout the year or the apple cider that we take and store and try to make into hard cider over the winter. And it was so much fun hanging out at Leslie's with all of our friends. It's funny, we all get so busy during the summer that we barely see each other than when we're working on projects together. And so to just have a day where we're doing some light work and hanging out, it's a lot of fun. I mean, heck, even some of the footage that you see here in this video was shot by the kids who were at the party. I let them take a GoPro and go wild, and they got some pretty interesting stuff.
Why are you filming me?
Because we need you. Why do you need me?
Because.
Yay, I'm a TV star drinking apple cider.
And I know you guys are like, dude, just can it. Just tell us what the deal is with the balloons and the needle. Come on. So our plan has been that we would take a lot of the surplus cider that we press from all these wild apples that we have scattered around here and use it to make hard cider. We did this last year to great effect, and you know, we pressed it in September, we stored it for a couple of months, and then in December we had just a couple of great parties where we all got together and hung out and enjoyed the cider, and it was just so much fun. And so we figured that we should make this a tradition, and so we started processing the apples to become this hard cider again that we would enjoy again as a group of friends later this winter. So we took all the excess cider that we had and we poured it into bottles. And when I say it poured it into bottles, it now looks kind of like this. We got about 10 gallons of cider in bottles like this. And I'm now getting ready for the final stage of making our hard cider. Now I know some of you are probably wondering that when we were grinding up all of the apples, well, what do we end up doing with the apple pulp? Well, I've done a couple of different things with the apple pulp here. Like last year, I took an amount of the apple pulp and I spread it out on a bed. This year we've had a lot of luck where I've got this one bed of seedlings that are sprouting, probably 200 or 300 apple seedlings at this point. I'm gonna let them grow for another year or two. The idea here is I'm creating my own future apple seed stock. I can use those wild apples for pressing for cider purposes like you've seen in this video, or I can use those apple seedlings as rootstock and I can graft on other varieties of apples to those. So whatever it is, I always feel like I'm gonna have a need for apple tree seedlings. And so I've used a lot of the pulp from making the apple cider as a seed stock source. And so that's one use that we've used for the mashed up pulp. The other use that I've found that's been pretty awesome this year is I've been feeding it to the geese. So we have about 30 geese on our farm. We've been raising them for meat primarily. And I have been, for the last couple of weeks, feeding the geese a copious amount of apple drops, so all the apples that fall on the ground a little too early. Despite being a little reluctant early on, the geese have been absolutely devouring those things. And so I decided to give it a shot and try to feed them the apple pulp as well and see if they'd like that. At first they were reluctant, but after a day or so, they started to mow it down and devour it, and they ate pretty much all of the apple pulp from that entire apple pressing party. So what we're doing here is, currently this hard cider has these black caps. The only problem is, as the cider ferments inside these bottles, it's gonna start to explode. You can even see it really bubbling and getting carbonated already. These have been sitting for about a day. And so the role that the balloon's gonna play is, we're gonna put it over the mouth of the bottle, just like so. And that way, as the bottle ferments and it puts out a gas from the fermentation process, it's gonna go into the balloon will fill up just a little bit, and then it'll vent the air out of the hole that I poked with the pin. See, I told you this stuff would make sense, you guys. You could really hear that one right there. You hear that pop, like I was opening a bottle of soda? That's that carbonation, so I gotta give it a chance to vent out or else the bottle will absolutely explode. Last year, I don't think I actually did this process right, and I tried to gas it every couple of days by opening the bottle and just letting the carbonation come out by itself, but even then I don't think I was doing it effective enough, so that's where I have some high hopes for this balloon method. Full disclosure, this is the first time I've ever tried something like this. Now, for you DIY types out there, you might be wondering, well, how am I doing this? Like, what's the recipe I'm actually going for here? The only thing that we've done has been to process the wild apples. I personally prefer wild apples. I like the tartness that they often have. Look at this, right? This balloon's already starting to get some air pressure into it. So I didn't use any sort of yeast. I didn't use any sort of sterilizer. I did put our bottles through the dishwasher before I used them, just as an attempt to slightly sterilize it, but I didn't use any chemical sterilizers. There are no yeasts, there are no added sugars here. Yeah, this process is entirely natural. The way that the fermentation works though, apples generally speaking on their exterior skin have natural wild yeasts on them. And so I don't need to add anything for the fermentation to happen. They will do that naturally. That's why, like, if you've ever picked up an apple like on the ground that's been a drop sitting there for a couple of days, you'll smell it, and it actually, you can start to smell the alcohol in it. So now what's gonna happen is I'm gonna take these bottles and I'm gonna bring them downstairs into our basement, and I'm gonna store them. And I will store them probably until about early December. I might check in on them and do a little bit of a taste test come Thanksgiving time. The fact that the balloon stays at exactly this size is how you know it's working. It's in early December, mid-December, they should be ready to enjoy. I found that if I let them sit too long, they start to go a little bad and you almost get like a vinegar instead of a nice, sweet, but alcohol-y hard cider. But to be honest, I am merely a hobbyist. I am a guy who just loves to go around and find wild apples, pick as many as I can, mash them up with my friends and family, and put them in bottles, store them, and enjoy them with my friends and family. If you guys want to see some of our apple adventures from last year, I made this little playlist right here. Just click on it and you'll be able to check it all out. I will see you in those videos, and thanks for watching, guys.